Grey photography shapes our perception of the world around us, and that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. For me, two photographers have had an especially profound influence on how I approach my own photography recently: Cristobal Hara and Nikos Economopoulos. They both have distinct styles and ways of working, but the stark difference between the two bodies of work that I'm going to show you in this video is that one's all in colour and the other is all in black and white. Deciding on black and white or colour has been a bit of an inner debate in me recently, and I never really know which I prefer. So in this video I'm going to explore what I've learned from both photographers, how we can shoot in colour or black and white with intention to achieve different results, and ultimately how these two incredible photographers have changed how I see. Cristobal Hara is a Spanish photographer who I found out about via a great Framelines video with Josh Goose and Matt Stewart. I'm so stoked that I managed to pick up a copy of Hara's book Vanitas, which is an incredible collection of colour photographs that explore the themes of life, death and human impermanence. In street photography, we're so often told to look for the decisive moment, which is a way of thinking made popular by Henri Cartier-Bresson. But in Hara's work, as put beautifully in the foreword written by Ignacio Gonzalez, he seems to look instead for the irrelevant moment. The moment when the photograph is spoiled because the subject has turned his head away, or someone's blocked the view, or you can't clearly see what's happening, or the possible interest slips over the edges of the photograph. Once you spent some time looking at the photos in this book, you realise that nothing is a mistake. Everything is in its place and couldn't possibly be anywhere else. And I really love this way of working. It's fresh and bold, and he lets the emotional essence of a scene unfold in a way that's inherently imperfect, messy and spontaneous, often harmonising strong colours. And this is precisely what sets Hara apart: his use of colour to evoke mood and the candid nature of his free and loose compositions. For example, this photograph is certainly not perfect. It's blurry and the highlights are overexposed, but I love it. It's because of this imperfection that it's so evocative, dreamlike, or even maybe nightmarish perhaps. The pop of red from the flowers clutched in the man's hand gives another layer of meaning to the image. Red is evocative of love and passion, but also anger and danger and violence. The fact that the flowers are red, coupled with the religious overtones of the setting, make it a really powerful photograph for me. The photograph's imperfection further reinforces the idea that life, much like the image itself, is fragmented and incomplete. When Hara uses colour in his work, it elicits a visceral feeling of discomfort, longing, or quiet melancholy sometimes, and really highlights a sense of place. For me, the photos in this book are less about documentary, but more about showing us what Spain really feels like, and that's just so powerful. This is what I find most compelling about Hara's approach. He captures the feeling of a place, or even a fleeting moment, by leaning into the rawness of life, finding beauty in imperfection and messiness. There's also an ongoing theme of red in this book, which gives a thread that follows the theme of life and death throughout the body of work. One of the most striking features of Hara's work is his ability to use colour not as a means of decoration, but as an emotional tool. For example, in this photo, the vibrant red-orange of the woman's dress and her fiery hair immediately draws the viewer's attention. This use of warm, saturated tones contrasts with the muted, earthy greens of the grass and the dull grey of the overturned car, emphasising her presence in the scene. As we discussed, red often conveys danger, passion or trauma. Here it amplifies the emotional intensity of the scene, hinting at physical injury and the broader narrative of an accident or catastrophe. Hara's work is about creating an emotional resonance. The colours, at once subtle and bold, pull the viewer into a world of mood and atmosphere, making the scene feel both alien and familiar. In this photo, again, colour is used in such a pleasing way. The red ribbons of the boy's head, neck and arm convey energy, playfulness, but also intensity, contrasting with the subdued tones of the background and the calm presence of the older woman. His bright white shirt, accented with red, stands in contrast against the earthy tones of the stone wall and the muted clothing of the seated figures. The vivid green toy gun adds an absurd, sort of humorous element, but also the boy has such a real look of anger on his face, which, coupled with the red blindfold, is full of symbolism. Together, the red and white, the boy's dramatic pose, and the green toy gun evoke a sense of theatricality or cultural symbolism, while the neutral tones of the woman suggest detachment or maybe quiet observation. This vivid contrast between the boy's dynamic energy and the woman's static stillness creates a layered narrative of youth versus age, action versus calm, and individuality versus community. This photo too really shows the non-moment or moment of imperfection that absolutely makes it exciting and worth looking at in my opinion. This hand cutting across the frame with the pop of red from the shirt obscures another person's face, but also frames the crowd clearly looking at something important. What some might consider to be a mistake, for me is a powerful image and a refreshing take against the widely accepted ideal of the decisive moment. Hara's work has really inspired me to approach colour with greater freedom. I no longer feel the need to perfectly frame every scene or polish every detail, and in fact, using colour as a more abstract element in my photography is something I'm really excited to try more of, to break out of trying to show something literal all the time. Less about capturing the moment and more about trying to convey a feeling. I've begun to see colour as an emotional language in itself, capable of conveying everything from nostalgia to uncertainty. Hara's photographs show how colour can be used not only for visual impact, but as a tool to express an atmosphere, an environment charged with the intangible hum of life. But what about if we take colour out of the equation completely and only rely on tones of grey to convey what we want to say or show with our photography? How can we still capture emotion and compelling compositions without the use of the power of colour? Well, for me, Nikos Economopoulos and his black and white photography made me want to absolutely forget about colour, so his outstanding monochrome work is what we're going to explore next. In stark contrast to Hara's vibrant colour, Nikos Economopoulos' black and white photography from the book In the Balkans invites us to look at a slice of time through contrast, composition and raw emotion. Now, I'm probably absolutely butchering his name, so I'm just going to refer to him by his first name for the rest of the video. Nikos is a Greek photographer, part of the world-renowned Magnum Photo Agency who has worked extensively across the Balkans. This body of work is characterised by his ability to capture intense moments of drama and action, often in the midst of social and political upheaval. This book showcases his powerful black and white images which seem to distill the raw essence of a scene by stripping away the distractions of colour and focusing entirely on the play of elements in the frame, contrast and also human expression. Nikos actually uses similar compositional devices to Hara, like using limbs to break up a frame into sections or to lead the eye. He's also a master of suggestion, intentionally leaving out parts of bodies to add mystery and to really make the viewer work to understand what's happening. His compositions are outstanding and always surprising, and he doesn't repeat the same idea once in this book. Each photo feels different but also connected somehow. This style really makes you feel like you're there and adds a spontaneity to the framing which throughout the book is often quite complex and layered but without feeling contrived. Sometimes with well layered images they can feel a little bit sterile, like the photographers tried too hard to get separation and balance for lots of elements in the frame, but Nikos achieves this with an imperfection, like he was in the moment and not trying too hard to fit in loads of elements. In so many of his photos you really get a sense of what it was like to actually be there. For example, this photo, which is probably my favourite from this book, shows a complex scene. Every element is perfectly placed in the frame, and even the liquid in the bottle the lad is drinking from lines up with the wall perfectly. This photo is an amazing example of what we call layering, showing something interesting in the foreground, middle ground and background. But what makes this one so special is it doesn't feel like this has been forced or decided by the photographer. You really get a feeling like it was the right place and right time because of all the perfectly placed elements. It's beautiful to look at, but you don't feel like it was designed in any way. Though I would like to see the contact sheet for this role to see how much Nikos moved his body to get the right shot. Ultimately, it's a fine line between a messy, difficult to read photo with too many elements to a well layered photo that seems almost too perfect. This image fits right in the middle, and I love it. Nikos is a master of storytelling. Nothing is wasted in every frame, and he includes a lot of details that enrich the image to not only sort of add depth and visual interest, but also to spark a story. For example, this picture at first glance is just of a girl, but what makes it extraordinary is when you notice the lamb under the sheeting. It's weird and strange and prompts a lot of questions. If the lamb wasn't there, then for me this image would be pretty boring, but Nikos clearly spent a long time actually living or being part of the communities he photographs in the Balkans, and that shows in his work. The feel of the images is less snap and run, but more fly on the wall, like he's been accepted as part of the surroundings and allowed to go about his work without disturbing the natural goings on around him. This really teaches me how powerful it can be to spend a lot of time in a place. Live there, or at least go back time and time again to make images that the viewers really feel like they were there and part of it. In this book, none of the images feel staged or rushed at all, and oftentimes what are tragic scenes are photographed with dignity. There are a lot of other photos in this book that showcase this busy, layered kind of image, and I love how he's never afraid to cut off people's heads or other parts of their bodies. It always feels intentional and adds to that spontaneous, in-the-moment feeling. But he doesn't just use this device for every photo in the book. He's also so very good at noticing little details that make a frame work, such as this woman reading a book, framing the shot at an angle to make it feel a bit disorientating, and there's also a dystopian feeling with the large eye staring back at you from the book in the absence of the figure's face. And also the detail of this image where this performer plays a trumpet placed in juxtaposition to the man chugging a beer in the same stance. It really is so very powerful by the absence of anything else in it. It heightens the story of this performer creating something and then of this man drinking away his sorrows in a sort of negative way. To focus a bit more on the black and white of Nikos' work, what I love about his photos is they don't rely on colour to convey mood. Instead it's the tension between light and shade, the geometry of the composition and the fleeting expressions of the subject's faces that hold the viewer's attention. Nikos has an extraordinary ability to use the absence of colour to heighten the emotional weight of his subjects, allowing every detail, every wrinkle, every flicker of emotion to speak volumes. The absence of colour doesn't diminish the power of these photos, it focuses our attention on the movement of bodies, the tension in the air, and the weight of social unrest. In these photographs, black and white is not simply a stylistic choice, it's a tool that shapes the emotional intensity of each frame. What Nikos' photos teach me above all is that black and white photography forces you to think about the image in terms of shapes, contrast and the dynamics of light, which you could call form, and also the activity or moments of importance happening inside the frame, which you could call content. He uses both form and content time and time again to convey compelling scenes. Unlike colour photography, where hue and saturation often provide immediate emotional cues, black and white photography demands a deeper engagement from the subtleties of form and composition. So what do you think? Colour or black and white? When I compare the work of Cristobal Hara and Nikos Economopoulos, I see two very different worlds, yet both photographers share a profound understanding of how to communicate emotion through their photos. Hara, with his fluid, unconventional compositions and bold use of colour, captures a sense of place and mood that transcends the literal scene. His work encourages me to embrace the unpredictable nature of life and to find beauty in the fleeting, often overlooked moments. Economopoulos, on the other hand, teaches me that black and white photography is about contrast. Contrast in elements, contrast in subject matter, and contrast in the way a scene is framed. It requires a different way of seeing, one that emphasises composition and timing, drawing the viewer's attention to the essence of the moment without the distraction of colour. Both colour and black and white photography have their own distinct magic, and through the works of Hara and Economopoulos, I've come to appreciate how each requires a different type of attention and way of seeing the world. But of course, there's a lot more to photography than just choosing black and white or colour, so check out this video next, which explores some ideas for improving your photography over the next few months.